DS Wario Stadium was the final course to be revealed in the original Mario Kart 8, and it might have had the biggest impact of them all. The DS variant of this course was the second Wario Stadium in the franchise, and I believe that this one has aged much better than its predecessor. But what sets it apart in Mario Kart 8's meta? Well, in the meta, Deluxe or 8U, you are picking this course for one reason and one reason only: to hold on to first place. So what makes it good for first place? Well, there's a ton of reasons that make it so you don't even have to be a particularly great driver to front run it, including the following: relative lack of off-road, plenty of boost panels and trick ramps, tech-heavy strategies that are harder to execute in the mid-pack than the front, heavily nerfed golden mushroom spots, backspam spots galore, and coin routing is amazing for first place early in races. Now we're going to talk more about coin routing in a second, but first, as a disclaimer, the track still follows some universal rules. It is anything but an auto win, and I see a lot of people pick it because, it's just standard for teams to do so. And make no mistake, there is a massive advantage to starting in first place here, but it is not automatic, and in free-for-all formats, you're likely picking it for a heightened chance of a front run, not a guaranteed one. Solid practice is required to take full advantage on what this course offers, because if you aren't sharp at the beginning section, you'll be not just wasting the track pick, but you may actually be putting yourself at a disadvantage if anything. What sticks out here early is the 4 coins after the first turn, and if you start in first, you take these coins. Period. If you are worried about getting bumped, taking 2 or at least 3 is still recommended. A lot of people who pull shrooms in upper mid spots first set might be tempted to immediately use them to try to go tide of the coin taker in first, and I can understand why in free-for-alls. But note, it will be difficult to hold on to first without those coins if you manage to get into first. So if you're in a 6v6, this is a good way to maybe throw first place off of his line if it's, an opponent. However, if you have a teammate in first, I'm telling you right now, just hold your shroom. Don't be greedy, because your teammate is in a better position than you, and your job should be to not screw with them. They will be able to give you a free 15 in many circumstances if you don't try to shroom in front of them, and if you do, they will outspeed you very quickly and likely cause bumps that throws the whole race off. If you pull a coin and all things go correctly, you will have 9 coins in first by the time you get to the second set, and likely everybody behind you will have 3 coins or less. Without off-road cuts everywhere and on a track with so many boost panels, this is an incredible advantage. So much of one that even running into the fireballs and the double ramps, even on lap 1, likely won't even make you lose first place. In 6 vs 6, I think what often isn't realized about Wario Stadium is that you aren't really picking this because you expect all your top spots to front run. You're essentially acting as a shield for the player who got first place to almost get a free win, and having second place not red them is a big bonus. 15 points is a big ordeal, and a lot of you will still be able to control the items in the upper mid-pack. The idea here is to start by shielding your first place player, and see what else you can get from there. In 6 vs 6, it's also very important to communicate early on. Assuming the player in first successfully is broken free, there's one way he can lose it, and that's really by getting red shelled. This means that letting the player know if you hold second by the time the first ramp ends is important, because the frontrunner will need to call who gets the double. My rule of thumb is that if you're in first place and you don't have a firm grasp on the situation behind you, just take the double. You don't want to risk getting hit for no reason, because you just lose your advantage immediately if that happens. But the other thing to note here is that the margin of error is so big that, going wider for the double's not really going to ever make you lose first place. However, if your teammates have your back and have, top 2 or top 3, you should probably leave them the double and let them know that you're going to do that. One last way to stop the quote free 15 if you're facing somebody who gets the pick is if someone on your team can pull a banana first set. Sniping first place off the first ramp just 5 seconds into the race can sometimes be a race-changing play, and you should go for it if you're in danger of letting a runner break free every time. As far as holding a front run, there are a few things to know. So on the quad ramps, the MT is not something to focus on at lower level in my opinion. Its benefit is not too big, and being able to have good alignment and taking the double if needed is more important in most situations. And like mentioned, you have some room for error if you're collecting coins on lap 1. The double ramp MTs you should definitely learn in some form though. There are more advanced ways to do these, and holding back during the air while making the MTs harder is a bit quicker. It's up to you how much you practice these, but doing them well is necessary at higher levels. Now, hopping over the anti-gravity section cracks is marginally faster too, and you should get comfortable doing this when you need to. The first one is especially a great place to crack red shells going after you, which can make a world of difference sometimes. At the end of the lap, there's a lot of strategies to use as well. One thing I do is a SMT to SMT strat that requires some mid-air soft drifting to pull off, and when taking the cut, one UMT will be more than fine as well. Make sure that with both, approaches, shroom or shroomless, you know how to low glider at the end though. So right after going off the glider, if you time a pressing of the R button right, your glider will allow you to glide lower and land sooner. This is not to be confused with a trick. Now on lap 3, you'll still want a low glider, but you'll also want to hold upward during your UMT boost after that's done. There's a lot of amazing places to throw items back in this track due to the sharp turns. I can't really choose many that stand out, but some of the most common ones is backing in green the turn after the first ramp. A lot of people recognize that this is a common back spot and go wide, but with good accuracy you can turn this into a 50-50 with high level players where you force them to choose an option and cover one of them. At lower level, backing type might be a 100%er. The first turns are also great for back greens and bombs, as is the anti-gravity section landing after the anti-gravity before the last set. Fireflowers seem to do a lot of damage on lap transitions or even the beginning of lap 2 and 3 if you have a window. And fire and bombs act a little bit wonky before the anti-gravity section due to the incline. They will go more to the left than anticipated, and in some instances, especially with bombs, you can actually use this to your advantage for a surprise attack. If you really want to be an asshole, you can practice this usually useless bomb spot at the end of the lap, as it is a guaranteed hit before the glider and a complete blind spot to taking the shortcut. So it's not too hard to pull off, and you can totally impress your friends if you're about 5 seconds ahead of them. So, with that all being said, what happens if you don't front run? Because, well, it's quite hard to manage this track in FFAs if you're egg in the back, not gonna lie, but there are different approaches to it. So in free-for-alls, it is actually hard to recommend anything but focusing on coin collecting as early as possible. I actually have a race in the description that's kind of an example of how early I'm willing to bag on this course for coins in a non-6v6 format, and I'd recommend checking that out if you have extra time. It can be futile to play the upper pack early on. Most coins will be taken by the top spots very quickly. It's worth noting that most coins aren't located in the middle of the course either, so if you forgo them early, you might find collecting them to be kind of difficult for a while. The big exception is right before the anti-gravity, as there's a 2 and 3 patch of coins. And on lap 1, be careful about going for the 3 depending on your pace, because the fireballs right after can sometimes be right in the way, rendering the investment useless if you hit them. To reiterate, make sure you're not entering lap 2 with like 2 coins in the mid pack, because you're probably not going to like the end result if that is what your situation is. Keep in mind when coming back that golden mushrooms aren't incredibly useful. You're going to want to find that sweet spot where you can still pull triple shrooms and stars while still finding enough coins to make comebacks manageable. The hope here is that there's enough pack chaos that you can slide right on by at some point lap 3, probably with a star or a boo. And as for 6v6s, good luck bagging this one. Sometimes you have to, you don't have a choice, the other team just, kind of sets up front. But this is one of the tracks where running 5 people instead of 4 is sometimes a risk that high-level teams choose. And there are 3 sets, and the second and third sets are quite far apart, and sometimes a good shock will simply neutralize the race, not, displacing those who got up front early. If you have to go for the shock, rolling multiple items of the first set is your best bet. Set 2 is also fair game for pulling shocks, but keep in mind you may want to be used to hopping over the 4th ramp of the quad ramps in the section before to quickly decelerate, because if you're hitting the boost panel, you're probably going to fly by and you won't be able to stop really efficiently. And finally, the last set is in the air and barely out of reach to really stop inside it, so this can be tough to bag on. If you are too far back, bullet bills or even golden mushrooms can even be detrimental and mess with your ability to pull another one at the first set too. So if you want to optimize the amount of rolls you get, you'll likely have to sacrifice your race. This sacrifice can sometimes be well worth it though, because oftentimes the other team is just so set up front that you're not really going to pass them by just driving normally, so sometimes getting that shock is what your team will need to, neutralize the race. As a final note, the mid-pack can be an absolute war zone on this track, but in 6 vs 6, being able to have your team control it is crucial. Shocks are not as powerful on this course, and there are tons of great trapping spots, so if you can deliver hits with all your pack items on a consistent basis, on top of having a runner or 2 break free, you'll definitely get a lot of value out of this course. Consistency goes down in free-for-alls and Mogi formats, but that is more so due to that being a universal truth of those formats than anything else. It is still a fine first place pick in really any mode whatsoever. So my advice for an MK8 player, have this track in your skill set somewhere, because you will be playing it quite a bit.